Dust on his desk where he sat, you remember. Trips to Catalina every December. Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. On the road with your dad, but it seems like lately you don't want to get up, want to sleep all day, but it's never enough. Plus Dolores stopped calling. In your dreams, the piano keys falling. You saw Betty in the club, whiskey in your cup, wish you had someone to love. Toontown, no you haven't been back. When the memories return, you'll be sipping on that Jack. And you're tripping on the fact that a tune would attack and leave your brother flat. Now peace is what you lack. Used to be a lot of laughs way back in the day. Now you drink so you can sleep and the nightmares go away. But you still see those eyes glowing red in his head as you toss and turn in your Murphy bed. Remember how you saved Huey, Dewey, and Louie? Cleared Goofy's name, just like in the movies where the good guys win. Finding a balance, no case too big for Valiant and Valiant. That's why you miss your little brother. So if we need to find you, you'll be hiding in these covers undercover. We can work it out, work it out, work it out. Gotta put the bottle down, bottle down, bottle down. Cause we haven't seen you round. Your friends and family miss you when there's trouble in the town going down. We can work it out, work it out, work it out. Gotta put the bottle down, bottle down, bottle down. Cause we haven't seen you round. Your friends and family miss you when there's trouble in the town. You remember laughter, that high squeaky voice, those burning red eyes. How you had to make a choice. Should you chase the tune down Yoxer Street or stay with your brother? It was hard to see, but Teddy never made it, he was crushed, you see. Now you no longer trust the LAPD, cause they never found leads on that crooked tune. In the dark alleyway, Teddy met his doom. When you see the hills all shiny and green, you can't go back, cause you still hear his screams. And now you know they've got meetings to help with the grief, but you can't leave the house, think you'll take 40 winks. And it's been 40 weeks since you last touched his desk. Newspaper clippings in a pile, you could guess. The Valiant Bros had the best reputation. The gumshoes would come through, what a combination. You pray one day you'll laugh again. Call Bugs up like way back when. Say, what's up, doc? Man, how you been? It will be so good to finally see your friends, because they've always been there. When you're ready, you'll pour one out for your brother Teddy. But until then, you're sleeping in, cause you can't face a world that he's not in. Eddie Valiant, we can work it out, work it out, work it out. Gotta put the bottle down, bottle down, bottle down. Cause we haven't seen you round. Your friends and family miss you when there's trouble in the town going down. We can work it out, work it out, work it out. Gotta put the bottle down, bottle down, bottle down. Cause we haven't seen you round. Your friends and family miss you when there's trouble in the town going down. You got a call from RK Maroon, world renowned for maroon cartoons. Went to his office, poured yourself a drink, saw Dumbo through the window and it made you think what the flying elephant in the room might be. Saw his face in the glass and you took a seat. On Maroon's newest project, he needed a hand. He was over budget, 25 grand, cause a famous actor couldn't learn his lines. A broken-hearted rabbit, you were like, never mind, you don't work for tunes anymore, don't be silly. Forget Screwy Squirrel, forget Chili Willy, forget Dinky Doodle, you had to let him go. Just ask Angelo, you don't work for them no more. You said, RK, you better call someone else, cause tunes on the run are bad for your health. Eddie Valiant, we can work it out, work it out, work it out. Gotta put the bottle down, bottle down, bottle down. Cause we haven't seen you round. Your friends and family miss you when there's trouble in the town going down. We can work it out, work it out, work it out. Gotta put the bottle down, bottle down, bottle down. Cause we haven't seen you round. Your friends and family miss you when there's trouble in the town going down. Now I know why you yank my ears. All those times you yank my ears, cause you're mad at tunes, deep down it's clear. Yeah, you're mad at tunes, and you've been for years. Now I know why you yank my ears. All those times you yank my ears, cause you're mad at tunes, deep down it's clear. Yeah, you're mad at tunes, and you've been for years.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the show. This is episode number 110 of Pop Culturally Deprived, and today we're going to be talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit on your He Weren't No Rabbit podcast. I'm Mandy Kay.
And I'm Matthew Vose. And our guest this week wrote and performed the song that you heard in our intro. He's a rapper, cartoonist, a TEDx talk-giving, record label-running superstar. MC Lars, welcome to Pop Culturally Deprived.
Thank you both for having me. Nice to speak with you.
Yeah, really, really excited. So, I first heard your stuff, ironically, in a Hot Topic, and fell in love with you doing, Shakespeare and Melville, Edgar Allan Poe, and just some cool stuff. But you came to singing about Roger Rabbit quite late, but it's clearly something you like a lot.
Yeah, I interviewed the guy Gary Wolf, who wrote the book Who Censored Roger Rabbit that the movie's based on. He was on my podcast a few weeks ago, and with the 30th anniversary last June, I wanted to do an EP about it, and it's just something that's to me it's like reminiscent of an era before the world changed, before animation went to CGI really, and to me, it's like indicative of, I was 5 when the movie came out, and it's very nostalgic for me. So yeah, thanks for bringing me on to talk about it with you too.
Yeah. So you've got a 6-track album about it that then also includes a commentary.
Yeah. It's called Notes from Toontown. And then on Bandcamp, the last track is me doing a commentary of the movie, the whole thing that syncs up with it. And then on my Zombie Dinosaur album, I did a song called The Dip, which is not on the EP. So I don't know what it says about me, if it's like something psychological. When I got married in August, my vows were based on Roger's note to Jessica.
Oh, fab.
So it's a bit much maybe, but I'm a fan, and I think it's just a movie that will never be made again and could never be made again. And Eddie's sobriety, all that is like, it's I can relate to that too. And so it's just it's a great piece of pop culture history. And I can't believe that this is the first time Mandy has ever seen it. I don't want to jump the gun, but that's crazy.
It is crazy. I know. I get that a lot.
I'm jealous that you got to watch it for the first time. That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah. So Mandy, how come you've not seen this?
This is actually one of the ones I was not allowed to watch when I was a kid. I wanted to. I remember begging to watch this movie because everybody else loved it. It had all these cartoons in it, and I wasn't allowed. I actually talked to my mom about this yesterday, and she doesn't remember this. I think it's hilarious. She says that she knows she never cared for the movie, but she doesn't actually remember why she didn't let me watch it. But she's also much different now than she was then. And I'm fairly certain that Jessica Rabbit was too sexual. And because Roger Rabbit was married to Jessica Rabbit, he had to be a pervert. So it was way too much for my 6 and 8-year-old sensibilities back then.
Yeah, I don't think you can defend the Jessica Rabbit as a sexual thing.
Oh, yeah.
There's no way around that one. Yeah. Okay.
But it's funny, though, because my understanding of who Roger Rabbit was, my whole life has been defined by my mom not allowing me to watch this movie as a kid. And so when I sat down to watch it, I was completely blown away that he was not at all what I expected.
What did you expect him to be? That's an interesting point.
Well, I expected him to be almost more like Jessica Rabbit or like Jessica Rabbit's counterpart, not this silly, almost childlike's the wrong thing to say, but he's very innocent and naive, and he's got this high-pitched voice, and he just wants to make people laugh. That is absolutely not what I expected. I expected somebody who was, I guess, more like Baby Herman, the real Baby Herman, like the 50-year-old lust with the 3-year-old dinky. That's what I was expecting from Roger, and did not get it. It's weird. I really am upset that I was not allowed to watch this movie and that I went my whole life thinking that it was something different than it is.
The author, Gary K. Wolf, when I interviewed him, he said that Roger and Eddie were the two sides of his personality. So Roger's the childlike, fun entertainer who's sweet and good. And Eddie's Eddie's just the shadow side of Roger. And Gary said as he gets older, Roger has come out more in him as he's been happier and found peace and joy in his 50s and 60s. And I think that's interesting that Roger, I think, is this character that I relate to him because, I had ADD as a kid, and he's very over the top, out of control, but all he wants to do is make people laugh. And all he wants to do is be there for his friends, but he can always sabotages himself and always goes crazy. And what makes him great as a cartoon also is what constantly gets him in trouble. And to me, that's an interesting character because he's got more depth than Mickey or Donald or even Bugs. And I think that's cool that you had this preconceived notion and then you realize it sounds like you were drawn to him because he's more kind of innocent and sweet than you thought, if I'm reading you right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Did you know it was going to be a mix of cartoon and live action?
I did, but I thought it was going to be something like not where they existed in the same world, but where either a human gets pulled into the cartoon world or a cartoon gets pulled out, more like Cool World.
Okay, yeah.
And so I didn't realize that it was just a world where they coexisted.
Interesting. Okay. Do you want to give us some background before we get into your thoughts on it?
So I recognize I am probably the only person who has never seen this movie, but Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a 1988 hybrid live-action and animated comedy film directed by Robert Zemeckis. Based on the 1981 novel Who Censored Roger Rabbit by Gary K. Wolfe, it stars Bob Hoskins, Christopher Lloyd, Charles Fleischer, and Joanna Cassidy. Walt Disney Productions bought the rights to the novel, believing it would be a blockbuster. Robert Zemeckis offered his services to direct, but he was turned down at the time. After the screenplay was written by Jeffrey Price and Peter Seaman, test footage was developed with Paul Reubens voicing Roger Rabbit, but it wasn't until Michael Eisner became the CEO of Disney that the project finally took off. Amblin Entertainment, Steven Spielberg's production company, was approached to produce alongside Disney, and it was Spielberg who convinced the other studios, like Warner Brothers, to allow their characters to also appear in the film. The film was ultimately released under the Touchstone Pictures banner because of the many sexual references in the film. Zemeckis had final cut privileges and refused to change anything. It opened number 1 and went on to gross nearly $330 million worldwide. It was the second highest grossing film in 1988 after Rain Man, and nominated for 6 Academy Awards. It won for Best Sound Effects Editing, Best Visual Effects, and Best Editing. Who Framed Roger Rabbit rekindled an interest in the golden age of American animation and served as a stepping stone for the Disney Renaissance. In 2016, it was added to the Library of Congress's National Film Registry for being culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. There was so much more to say about this movie. It was so hard to cut it down to just that little bit.
That's a great synopsis. Props to you for that.
Yeah, there is so much trivia and inside, like how they did things, how it was all put together, people off at the side of the set.
Well, and even just who they wanted initially to play Eddie. Like, they offered it to Harrison Ford, who turned it down because he was too expensive. They wanted Chevy Chase to do it. He didn't want to do it. They wanted Tim Curry to play Judge Doom, but he was too scary.
Yeah, I can see that.
So just reading about all of the different iterations this movie went through was fantastic.
Bill Murray, who they apparently couldn't track down. I don't know. And Gary said that they did test screens with Eddie Murphy, but Eddie Murphy was too cartoony and too silly that he made the tunes less funny. So I don't know if that's true, but that's what Gary said. And he said he was very involved with the production and stuff. So that's interesting trivia.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it works really well with someone playing it straight. Like we did Muppets Christmas Carol, and seeing Michael Caine coming in and doing it, that he's just performing with these things. He's not, mucking about with it. It works so much better.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, in a world where tunes and humans live together, Roger Rabbit is framed for the murder of Marvin Acme. P.I. Eddie Valiant, who hates tunes, ends up involved and has to help solve the case to save both Roger and Toontown.
Okay. Where is it available to watch over there? Lars, do you own this? Do you own every copy of it?
I do. I have VHS. I have it on Laserdisc. I have it on DVD. And then when it came out on Blu-ray, I bought it too. So I've definitely pirated it on my laptop.
Okay.
So and so I do own it. I think the Blu-ray is awesome because there's some extra stuff in it and it looks really good. It came out in 2013, I think.
So you've got one of those XXX laser discs.
Well, I've never watched it, but I don't know if it's the recalled one.
Right.
So who knows? Yeah.
Mandy, how have you been able to watch it?
I had to rent it from Amazon. It is not on any of the subscription streaming services here in the States.
Yeah, and sadly the same over here in the UK. Rented from Amazon.
It apparently has been on both Netflix and Hulu, but it no longer is.
Okay. It looked good in HD, though. Like you're saying with that Blu-ray one, this is a film that scales up really well. Yeah,
and it holds up because the effects being practical and traditional animation, it's some of the early CGI doesn't look as good as this, even though it was done 10 years after, which is interesting.
Right. You said Zemeckis directed, and then has a really strong cast. Mandy, have you seen them in anything else? What's some of their back catalogue?
I feel like we've talked about Zemeckis on the show before, but we haven't done anything in his filmography on the show, so I'm not really sure where I got that from. Probably because we live tweeted A Christmas Carol last year, but his filmography is actually really, really great. He's probably one of the more prolific directors that I've seen. He did the Back to the Future films, Death Becomes Her, Forrest Gump, Contact, Castaway, The Polar Express, and then 2009's A Christmas Carol. Definitely has a thing for Tom Hanks, I think.
Yeah. And he's got a really nice sort of family-friendly back catalogue. So much stuff in there you could watch at any era.
Yeah. All of those are movies that I absolutely love. And I was surprised. And they're all so different from each other, but they're so good. It's fantastic. Mm-hmm. Bob Hoskins, I really am only familiar with him from 2009's A Christmas Carol. I'm sure I've seen him in other things. I know Caitlin mentioned on Twitter that he was Smee in Hook. I wouldn't have figured that out just by watching him in this. Because all I see when I look at him now is Bob Cratchit. Mm-hmm. I can't help it. That's who he is now. I did look through his filmography, and I'm not super familiar with most of what he's done, although he's done a lot over the years.
Yeah. I mean, he's Mario. Let's put the big one out there.
Yeah, but I haven't seen that one either.
Yeah, and we're not going to watch that one. I'll tell you that for a damn fact.
We've recently talked about Christopher Lloyd because we did Star Trek 3 and he is Klingon Doc Brown. We've also talked about Joanna Cassidy before. She was on Blade Runner. And of course, I've seen her in Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. I can't think of anything else that she was in that I'd be super familiar with. Although I can tell you that when she first showed up on the screen, if I hadn't already known that Joanna Cassidy was in it, I wouldn't have recognized her.
Right. Is that Dolores?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I interject something interesting about Christopher Lloyd and the Zemeckis connection, like a cool trivia point? He was working on Back to the Future 2. They were working on that together, like around the time this movie came out, or before this movie came out, they were doing Back to the Future 2. And there's a scene where Marty McFly goes to like a retro place in the future, and it's all retro stuff. And there's a Roger Rabbit doll in the window. But it's funny because Roger Rabbit hadn't come out. They were just expecting it to be a hit and expecting people to be nostalgic about it in 2015 or whenever Back to Future 2 takes place. So that's kind of cool, that connection between Christopher Lloyd, Zemeckis, and like this anticipating the nostalgia people would have for the movie before the movie even existed. I just wanted to share that trivia.
Yeah, I like that because Back to the Future is not a Disney thing.
No,
so right. Someone just had the doll and stuck it in there. That's cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
You reminded me mentioning Touchstone. We were talking the other day with Disney taking over Fox. Like, is it going to be a return of Touchstone so they can release like Deadpool movies and things now? Because some of the characters they're getting in, I can't see Disney doing. So we might see a return of the adult Disney. Gary
also said when I interviewed him that like he kept referring to the movie as PG-13 because PG-13 people say is the Spielberg rating because he didn't want things to be R. So the studios created a rating for his movies. I think Raiders of the Lost Ark was like one of the first PG-13. And so Gary somehow remembered this movie as being PG-13. And, the stuff that Mandy was talking about, this definitely could have been a PG-13 movie. I feel like it's very, for a PG movie with the swearing and the drinking and the jokes and the humor, it's definitely a more of an edgy PG movie, which explains the Touchstone connection pretty well.
Yeah, if this movie had come out just a few years later, it absolutely would have been PG-13.
Yeah.
Yeah, over here, it's a PG, which is, I think you're supposed to have a parent with you for like 10 or under or something. But it's a little bit more lenient. We now have a 12 rating. I think even like the year after this came out, 12 started being a thing. Okay, similar material to this. There's no few films or genre that I can say is similar to this, but we do have a lot of films with kind of animated crossovers, like you were saying, Mandy. People go into cartoons and stuff. Have you seen anything that you could say is similar to this?
Yeah, the only one I can think of is the one I mentioned earlier, which is Cool World, which I loved back in high school.
Okay.
Probably only because it had Brad Pitt in it, honestly. I can't think of any others
Yeah, even like Mary Poppins and Bedknobs and Broomsticks do not go as far as this goes.
Right. Yeah.
And we'd eventually get Space Jam, but even that.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about Space Jam.
Yeah, it's not this.
No. There's nothing else quite like this, I think.
No, exactly. Okay, let's talk about it. Did you enjoy Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
I did. I really did. And the longer it sat with me, I think the more I've come to appreciate it for what they were trying to do and really what they did. I mean, it's a pretty spectacular piece of art.
Yeah, it's just, it's almost shocking how good it is that you don't notice that it's cartoons interacting with real people and flicking ties, carrying trays around, passing drinks and paper between each other. Like, it was when Paddington came out, and Paddington 2, there were comments of how good it is to have this CG character doing it. But I think it's even better here because you stop thinking what they're doing. Bob Hoskins is stood there acting to thin air with a handcuff dangling off him. It's so good. It's pretty much flawless.
Yeah. Well, so he wasn't completely acting to thin air because Charles Fleischer actually stood in the background wearing a full Roger Rabbit suit delivering his lines while they were filming. I don't know if you came across that bit of trivia, which I think is hilarious. But absolutely, I think, like you mentioned the similarity of the Muppet Christmas Carol and Michael Caine, like just acting very serious against the Muppets. But he actually had Muppets to act against. And here, Bob Hoskins, apart from Roger, all of the cartoons weren't there. And he was still absolutely engaged with this thing that didn't exist until it was drawn.
I think casting someone like Bob Hoskins is a really good way to go because he, certainly over here, he had a real reputation as a man's man, doing fairly gritty films, really honest performances. So he's someone who sells it well, and you can believe everything he goes through, the alcoholism, the stress of it all, because he's a solid character actor at it.
And his great American accent. Like when I learned that he's British, that impressed me. That was like, wow.
Yeah, like I forget that he is putting on an accent again because it's not the kind of broad American that you see for some British actors going over. Over here, he's almost most well known for a series of adverts he did for the British Telecom, BT, and he's got a proper Cockney accent. He was famous for his line of "It's good to talk," and then you hear him in this, and there's none of it coming through. He committed to this role really well.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known that he wasn't American if the internet didn't tell me.
So, Lance, you wrote several songs on this. Was there a jumping off point for doing them? Something where you went, okay, I'm going to do something about each character, each situation?
There's a huge expanded universe of it. Like Marvel Comics did I think there's like 20 issues they did, and then they did a Toontown spinoff. And so there's a lot of characters, and they also did a sequel comic. There's two sequels. There's the script that never got produced, and then there's Marvel did a thing called The Resurrection of Doom. And then I'd read all the books. And so I wanted to kind of create an EP that connected all the worlds because I felt like the movie is an interesting slice, and the movie is definitely like the canon of the story. But I wanted to connect what happened before this. In the prequel script, Roger is it's called the Toon Platoon, and he's in a World War II flying ace, and he goes abroad, and then they have to, they have to fight the Nazis. And then Spielberg didn't want to produce it because he was sensitive about that when after he did Indiana Jones, he didn't want to use Nazis as entertainment. So they changed, he passed on doing the script, but there's this whole background of Roger's story and then everything that happened after. So I wanted to make a 30-minute synopsis of like the broader story. Cause to me, it's fascinating. And like Mandy was saying that you forget that he's a cartoon character because he's so believable and real. And, the story just was interesting to me. And, also one of the undercurrents of this movie is the Toons don't have justice because the society is biased against them. And they're just kind of like the underclass people of this culture. And there's a lot of similarities to racism and prejudice that is like very intentional when they made this movie. So the EP kind of has a social justice angle to it about anti-prejudice, not to like make something serious silly, but like to try to bring that social conscious element out, which was very intentional when they made this, and in the book too that Gary wrote.
Yeah, because the book is a lot more serious with it and a lot darker for the character, as I understand. Not having read it.
Definitely. Yeah. And in the book, not to spoil, well, the book has like a very sad ending. I don't want to spoil it, but it's definitely like a twist that is not in the movie.
Okay.
Yeah, I recommend the books are all great. There's 3, and then you did a short story anthology called The Road to Toontown. But the first one is great. Who's Censored is like I very much recommend it.
Ah.
So I have a question then. I read that there was an alternate ending to the movie, and I'm wondering if that's the twist you're talking about in the book.
I'm curious we could since you all talk about the movies, it's not spoiling if we talk about like the alternate ending, right?
Right.
What is if you tell me what it is, and I'll tell you if it's what's in the book. How's that?
So the alternate ending, Roger died.
Right. That's what happens in the book.
Okay.
Too.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he didn't make it out of the final showdown with Judge Doom in the alternate ending.
In the book, it's interesting because the characters are comic strip characters and they talk in word bubbles. And only Baby Herman is the one who does animation as well. And so Roger creates a doppelganger of himself because he gets killed, and the doppelganger helps Eddie to solve the crime. But there's this urgency of time because he knows he only has a week to live. The doppelgangers they make in the comic strips in Wolf's book to be as stunt doubles. And so Roger knows that he has a finite amount of time. So as the book ends, you know, and he's fading away and thanking Eddie for his help. And it's kind of like, it's emotional. It's like he knows that he's going to die. And so his art and his performance and his work is like takes on this significance of as a performer, which has a whole different arc to it. But that's interesting that I didn't know they thought of including that in the movie, but that really would have changed things, I think.
I'm glad they didn't do that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, that's properly dark. And that is very honest to it being a noir story. Yeah, I'm not sure it would work for kids if you did that. Okay, let's talk a bit on Jessica. Mandy, you said up top that she was, certainly from your memory, one of the reasons not to be able to watch this. Do you think your parents were right to say not to watch it?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Oh.
I mean, she is definitely very highly sexualized, but I mean, she doesn't, it's that famous line, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way. I mean, that's honestly all it is. Like her personality and the things that she actually did, she didn't do anything inappropriate. She just wanted to love her Roger. Yeah,
their relationship is really well done. The fact that she's actually into him because of his personality, he doesn't salivate over her in the same way we see all the other men doing.
Right.
And that line, I'm not bad, I'm just drawn that way. It's reminiscent of what we saw in Sunset Boulevard. I am big. It's the pictures that got small.
Yeah.
She's so possessed of what she is.
Mm-hmm.
We had a message, in fact, two effectively, but we had one from Laura Espery on Twitter who said that she remembers being so fascinated by Jessica Rabbit, just really drawn to her, which I'm hoping is a pun, Laura, by the way. Looking back, I think this is why I went through various stages and attempts of trying to get my hair that colour during my 20s, only to be very disappointed each time. I think she was my first symbol of feminine sexuality that I can remember. Not a great surprise, she was hardly subtle. Thankfully, I grew to embrace a slightly more nuanced version of it, and her voice was amazing. Now, talking to my wife as well, she said exactly the same thing. She remembers everything about Jessica, you know, the amazing voice, the hair, the dress, that she is this hyper-sexualized but kind of, you know, perfect woman with the curves. But actually thinking about it now and talking about what would draw you to her, it's the confidence of the character. Mm-hmm. It's the fact she owns every room and every situation she's in, and she's always in control. She's supporting other people's stories. She doesn't necessarily have her own agency, but she is an active force in this and driving it forward. And I think that's actually really interesting. It's not, we don't get much from her in a character to show that she's different than what we're seeing, that we're told that she's not bad, but she is a very well written character to make people like her over and above the fact she has got this. I think I saw someone, one of the trivia was like, if she was a real person, her measurements would be 40, 23, 40.
That's just not healthy.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure that's even possible.
Yeah, I think gosh, if a character like this were written now, I think she would absolutely have been damseled, if not just all out fridged. And that they didn't do that to her, I think is pretty great. I mean, she did end up captured, but she was captured with Roger. She wasn't captured to drive Roger to do something. So I feel like even though, like you said, she doesn't have a ton of agency, she's still got her own confidence.
Yeah.
You know, she knows who she loves. She knows what she wants. She knows what she needs to do. And that's what she's trying to do. Even though we're not there for her story, we're there for Roger's. That doesn't mean her story is any less important to her.
Yeah, and I think that's actually probably more what I mean when I say agency. Her story is in support of his.
Yes.
But it is Who Framed Roger Rabbit, so.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably do this whole movie from her perspective and have another great movie.
So the film almost goes out of its way to make you think she is possibly the murderer or possibly involved in the murders. Yes. What did you think was happening as it went through? Was there a point where you were like, oh, don't trust her?
Yeah, when she hit Roger over the head and put him in the trunk of the car, and then they cut to the gun shooting Maroon, and they didn't show us who it was, but then, of course, Eddie sees her running through the warehouse. Of course, I thought that she had something to do with it. I think even in my notes, I was like, oh, shit, Jessica was behind it the whole time. And then, of course, we find out that's not true. It was a brilliant piece of misdirection. But I did, for probably about 5 or 10 minutes of the movie, I thought she had something to do with it and that she was working. Actually, I didn't expect Judge Doom to be the actual villain because it seemed so obvious.
Yeah. He is pretty villainous.
He is. He's so villainous that you don't expect him to be the actual villain. And I think that's pretty brilliant too.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's like a twist on what you expect. And going back, watching the movie again, I was struck by Judge Doom's rise to power. Is Eddie talks about when Teddy was killed and they're trying to stop a bank robbery and this guy got away with 1 million simoleons, and then you find out Judge Doom got elected by bribing people with the simoleons, right? It's like the connection there that it sets it up. And so it's almost like if he weren't the villain, it would make sense, but it's watching it again, you kind of see how he has to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Christopher Lloyd is clearly enjoying himself.
Yeah.
Did you notice that the entire time he was on screen, he never blinked?
Yeah, that is amazing.
I don't know how he did it, but it definitely contributed to his just general creepiness.
Yeah, I don't think I noticed, but it absolutely, it fits the whole bit where he's going away at the end with no eyeball in and trying to cover his face. But yeah, there is just something sinister about him all the way through, which I think it works to make it more of a kid's cartoon.
Yeah. I didn't expect him to turn out to actually be a toon. That twist actually surprised me. I feel like I probably should have seen it coming, but I didn't.
And Lars, I think I've heard you mention somewhere that there is a toon he is supposed to be.
Yeah, so his origin story is he's supposed to be a German-American immigrant named Baron von Ratten, who was in the silent cartoons. And because he had a squeaky voice, when they started adding sound, he couldn't get casted because, the squeaky voice at the end, my voice, I talk just like this, right? Like his voice prevented him from getting work. So he became bitter and jaded and hateful towards the toons that were getting the roles he used to get. And so he goes into politics, right? As any washed up reality star might do, or whatever, former entertainer, and becomes he hates the cartoons because he was out of work because of his role. And so in the follow-up, in the sequel, they bring him back to life because they take the dip, they drain the dip somehow from the pipes and then put him back on the multi-pane camera and bring him back to life as the original character he was. And so he's a black and white character, which is why he has no color to him too, which is interesting. So that's his origin story. And it's interesting.
Yeah. And there's a hint of that when he talks to Betty Boop of the same things, no one wants black and white cartoons. But that's basically one of the stories in Is it Sound of Music? No, not The Sound of Music. Singing in the Rain. As they're transitioning to talkies and sort of training people to talk better for the mics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
God, this film's got good stuff going on.
It does. I found myself remembering Sunset Boulevard several times whenever we were watching this. So I'm glad we watched that movie earlier this year.
Yeah, the sign on the front of the tram going to Sunset Boulevard is exactly the same sign as Sunset Boulevard.
Yeah.
Oh, speaking of the tram, can I share a quick, interesting story about one of the actors, the kids that pulls Eddie onto the back?
Yeah.
So when Eddie's walking out and he catches the ride, when the kid who gives him the cigarette, that kid later became Chris Brown's bodyguard and was with Chris Brown when Chris Brown got arrested for assault at that club. So that's interesting. This bad boy kid never gave up his bad boy image. So that's some. I forget his name, but that's a little footnote about the actor. Hey, mister, ain't you got a car? Right?
Yeah.
That's that kid.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and that is definitely something I did not pick up on as a child, where he's like, oh no, it's LA. We've got the best public transport system in the world. Like, that is a genuinely funny line in a film, but I wouldn't have picked it up until only a few years ago. So. And I think there's a lot in the film. You know, we're talking about it as a kid's film and having action, having a really obvious villain, a lot of good comedy in it. But as good as Disney has always done it, this works for kids and for adults. And I think it's all the action is really the sort of comedy and the visual gags really good for kids. There is so much of the dialogue that has that sort of element to it, or details about, you know, having just come out of a war, the joke about Harvey. Things that I can even remember watching it and saying to my mum, like, I do not understand that. And her having to explain, oh, well, there's this old film that's based on a play about a rabbit, which I only saw last year. And it's just almost a throwaway gag. But you see these references sort of linking up and going, okay, that's actually quite a clever, you know, thing to bring in.
Some of the references were like put in, you know, kind of shoehorned in. Like Harvey, the movie came out, I think, in 49, and Roger Rabbit takes place in 47.
Yeah.
So it's anachronistic. Another anachronistic thing is the cartoon, the Goofy cartoon that Roger watches when he's hiding out with Eddie, did not come out until like a year or two later. And they purposefully used it because it was Goofy's physical slapstick comedy. So to tell the story, they had to bend the chronology. And I don't know, you know, why I'm so interested in that, but that's something you wouldn't notice, but that's like a cool part of the storytelling, you know, minor details. We have cartoons living with humans, so these things maybe don't matter as much.
Yeah, but it utterly works to help root it in. It is a bit like our world, because they've got references and things that we would understand. And then it's this ridiculous fantasy. Oh, there's cartoons as well. There was one bit that I wanted that sort of caught me out watching it now. The first time we were properly introduced to the dip is the squeaking shoe nuzzling up to Doom. And he picks up a shoe and he sticks it in the dip. Now that shoe is still a cartoon. At what point is there a difference between the kind of prop that is the shoe or the sword and the kind of sentient, you know, Roger, Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny and so on? Is there a difference between them, or do they make cartoon props?
I don't think there's a difference. Like I think that was straight up murder. I was really upset at that scene.
You know, that shoe is voiced by Nancy Cartwright, who did Bart Simpson. Really? That was her first on-screen role. Just another little trivia. Yeah.
And I love this idea that it's voiced when it's a squeaking shoe.
Right. When he's screaming.
Yeah.
Or she, or whatever.
Yeah.
That, as a kid, that was like the first, like, example of evil to me, you know, like that was like seeing that, like, it's so, Mandy, it's like, don't you agree? It's like just so horrific because that shoe is so sweet and it's so messed up.
That shoe did absolutely nothing, and all of a sudden it's getting killed, like obliterated out of existence. And I think it's just as horrific if he had done the same thing to Bugs Bunny.
I really like that. It's, you know, a sense of evil. Absolutely it is. And they go really hard on it. They could have softened it, have been like, oh no, it's just reducing it and the colours will be reused or something. They actually say, you remember we thought there was no way to kill a toon? Well, he found it. Like, oh no, it's actually using the word kill. Oh, good.
Yeah. They did cut back on a little bit of Judge Doom's evil. Apparently there was a version of the script where it was going to be revealed that he killed Bambi's mom. And they didn't put that in there, so...
The real bad guy is man.
And that's it. Talking about the greater Disney world, Roger's supposed to be Thumper's nephew. And he's supposed to be, it's revealed, he's Bugs' son. So that they are all connected. So it's more trivia there. It's all the same world, which it's believable. He could have killed Bambi's mom.
Yeah.
Oh, that's dark. That's dark.
It is dark.
So, moving a bit into our favourite stuff, because I know, Mandy, the thing, looking at your notes on this, was just the sort of proliferation of cartoons got you. Mm-hmm. You were so in it. So talk to us a bit about that. What did you enjoy in seeing just all the cartoons coming in?
It was really just got this massive dose of nostalgia. I remember when I was a kid, Saturday morning cartoons are not really a thing anymore. But when we were kids, Saturday mornings, you got up early so that you could watch Looney Tunes and all these other cartoons that were on. And to see them again, like Woody Woodpecker was there and, Bugs Bunny was there and Porky Pig was there and Yosemite Sam was there. And, it was so... It just made me miss the way cartoons used to be.
Right.
Even watching the scene at the beginning where Roger and Baby Herman were filming their cartoon and just watching the hijinks and the physical comedy that was happening, I remember when all cartoons used to be like that. And I don't think they really are like that anymore. And so it made me happy just to sit there and watch kind of what used to be for a little while. And getting to see them all on screen together was pretty amazing. I think I read that there were over 140 different animated characters in this, and a solid 80 of them came from like Warner Brothers. And, all of the hoops they had to jump through to get them on screen together, like Bugs Bunny and Mickey Mouse had to have the exact same amount of screen time, the exact same amount of lines. That's why they had the scene together. The same thing with Donald Duck and Daffy Duck. And I love that they went through the trouble of making it happen, because as a kid, when you're watching cartoons, you don't care if it's a Disney cartoon or a Warner Brothers cartoon. It's just a cartoon that you love to watch. And so to see them all together just felt right. If that makes sense. It was great.
When they designed Roger, he was supposed to be like, have the heart and look of Disney, but like the movement and comedy of Warner Brothers, and then like the adult element of Tex Avery, right? And so to make that fusion happen when Richard Williams designed him, it's really bolstered by having that universe of the cartoons, and it all flows together. And I agree, it's spectacular. And, other than Ready Player One, like having so much intellectual property in one place, it seems like that might not happen again. Like that's
right.
Such a special moment where Spielberg coming on board, everyone wanted to be his best friend. So props to him for negotiating that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were some missing that I wish had been there. Like Tom and Jerry was a staple. Popeye, those weren't there.
Well, Popeye's in the scene at the end. Did you know that? Like where they're watching him, they all come in the final scene.
Okay, no, I didn't see that.
And there was this cut scene where there's a funeral, where it's Marvin Acme's funeral, and Foghorn Leghorn is giving the eulogy, and Popeye is one of the pallbearers.
Okay.
So yeah, his role in the movie was cut down a lot. So, but I agree, he should have been in it more. And Woody Woodpecker too is.
Yeah, it made me smile, honestly. Like even when I wasn't really paying attention to what was happening on screen, I was smiling just because they were all there.
And it's you're saying about like, taking the trouble to get the deal together to cross over and writing the characters in and using just such a range of characters, but then the effort they go to animate such a range and to bring them in at every single scene they can. Over and above all the work they do about how they're shading them for different lights, how they're having them interact with the people. It must have taken so much effort to go, right, now we need to do Lena Hyena, so we need to design her differently and incorporate elements of this, and then we need to get a voice actor in, and there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, well, I think there's a reason that at the time this was made, it was the most expensive movie ever made at the time.
Yeah, I think I saw with the longest credits ever.
Yes.
Which,
yes.
yeah, I can believe it.
Which is why when the sequel had speed bumps, they were like, "Oh, it was such a headache. Like it was great. Let's take a knee on this and not do that." If Disney isn't so excited about Jessica and this and that, like, yeah, because you're right. You're both right. It was such a singular effort, and that's why it's special, because it's doubtful something like this would ever happen again. You know.
So, Lars, you've been watching this for about 30 years, it sounds like. Is there
30
stuff,
years, yeah.
Yeah, is there stuff you'd say, okay, yeah, that is my favorite moment, my favorite joke, performance? What stands out to you in this?
Well, I mean, my favorite scene is when Eddie is going back into the tunnel and he is, about to take the swig of whiskey, and he shoots the bottle. And even though it's problematic that there's like the Native American bullet who's doing the war chant and stuff, when that scene to me is awesome, because that's where Eddie finds the strength to both conquer the demons of his past, which is, the post-traumatic stress that has led him to alcoholism of losing his brother, and realize that he needs Roger. And in writing, like every great character has something they want and something they need that they don't know they want. And Eddie wants to work for Toons again, and he needs to be sober and like be his old self to do that. So that scene, even in a comedy, that scene is always like stuck with me, especially as I've gotten older. And I stopped drinking like 3 years ago, and that for me was a huge improvement in my life that allowed me to like do things I couldn't before. And so I relate to that character in a way that as a 6-year-old I never thought I would.
Yeah, it is. I mean, he plays an actual alcoholic. It's not that he's a drunkard. When he's sat in Maroon's office and he sees the bottle and he just sits there sort of rubbing his mouth like, oh yeah, I am thirsty. Right. It's a Pavlovian response of, there's alcohol, I'm going to get it in me.
Have a drink, Eddie.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the way they set up the tunnel, it's this dark tunnel, it's nighttime, he's getting a gun ready, they're really setting up like Toontown is going to be a dangerous place for him. And then you get the song going into Toontown. And it's all like, he's so scared of it, but it's all buzzing hummingbirds and nice happy trees.
Well, what he fears is that juncture in his life where, having been this person who had family and love and his career on lockdown, suddenly got ripped from under him senselessly. And so his return to Toontown is this like juxtaposition of that tragedy, And so it's like he has to go back. And so it's like the heroic journey, right? And that,
yes.
and so that scene, kind of undercuts the sadness. And then when he finally gets there, everything, all the references, like that part of the movie is fantastic. And also I want to say, like, the soundtrack, I grew up, I went to school with Alan Silvestri's daughter. And so we would, go to their house and talk to him about the movie. And he was such a fan of Jaco Pastorius with the free jazz movement and the way they juxtapose the bebop of the 40s to the free jazz of like the kind of experimental jazz of the 50s and 60s with Toontown. That the music is like an interesting element of that. And I really loved as a kid talking to him about why he wrote the score and what that was like. So that was more information, but yes, my favorite scene is going to Toontown. That whole part of the movie is amazing.
I can understand that sort of thing being influential on you.
Yeah, so influential. And the idea also, and as an artist, as a rapper, like for me, it's always been about sampling, and like genre is the clothes that we wear. That's what that's what Lin-Manuel Miranda has said. What he likes about Weird Al is that genre is, we put on a style to convey a certain truth. And Roger Rabbit is a movie that really plays with the fluidity of genre for a greater narrative. And when I'm sampling like a punk band or doing a classical beat, or musically, that was a big influence on me, both the soundtrack and the movie, that kind of postmodern pop culture element. It's a stretch to say it's adjacent to hip hop, but it's similar in the idea that like the cut and paste element of culture is something that can be powerful if it's done with the right emotion and artistry. So that's kind of cool.
And like you were saying, combining some of that in Roger himself. He looks one way, he acts another, he moves and yet another.
Yeah, so cool. He's such a great character for that reason.
Talking on the songs, Eddie's song when he realizes he can make the weasels die laughing. Bob Hoskins sells that so wonderfully. He just suddenly realizes, oh, this thing that I hate, being silly and laughing and all this, I can use it as a weapon. And he does this great thing, and he's on the pogo stick and everything. And when we get to that moment where he's been doing some pretty good rhymes throughout it, and he says, I'm through taking falls, I'm bouncing off the walls. Without the gun, I'd have some fun. I'd kick you in the nose. And everyone's expecting it. Even all the, 10-year-old kids watching it would be expecting what the next word coming is. And they go with nose. And it makes it funnier. I love... Go on.
Yeah. No, I was going to say something about Eddie's backstory, and we get a glimpse of this when we see the desk of all his memories with Teddy. There's that shot of them dressed as clowns with the dad, and so his backstory is he was in the circus, right? And it's like a quick moment. So that him doing the singing and dancing goes back to his training as a circus clown performer, which was his inroad into becoming a detective, because he still wanted to do show business, but help people in show business. And so that's an interesting moment, because that's like his return to his original career as a performer. And so that's why Eddie can take the falls and juggle, is because he used to be a circus clown.
Yeah, and he just slips into it. But the film has done... I mean, the film has set up so many things early on that it delivers on. The shot of alcohol for Roger and what it does to him to then use it against Doom. So it delivers on it pretty quick. But early on, you see the hole that he ends up using on the magnet. You see the mallet. You see the fact that he was in the circus. The film absolutely subscribes to Chekhov's gun, but it sets up so much you don't know what's going to go off when.
Interesting. That's a great point.
It's solid writing all the way through. What I particularly loved in the song bit is on your commentary, you had a comment about Eddie doing the rhymes and saying, oh, he's basically freestyling. It's like 8 Mile.
I can't believe you listened to that. That's funny.
I have never thought that anyone could compare Roger Rabbit to 8 Mile, but that absolutely works.
It's the final rap battle. Right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I think, we've mentioned him already, but Christopher Lloyd is just wonderful in this, because for the most part, he's actually doing a different sort of villain than he did in Star Trek. He's a lot quieter, but with a lot more menace to it. He's not all shouty. And then at the end, he just turns it up to 11 and he goes full on villain. The way they style him with that long kind of rain mac, the long leather coat. So as he's flying across, it's like a cape. He's like a sort of bat swooping on him.
Yeah, I don't think I really paid that much attention to it. I thought the way he was dressed was kind of weird the whole way through. And so I don't think I noticed kind of that it did turn into that cape-like thing at the end. There was a lot going on, though, and I'm not going to catch everything the first watch through.
Absolutely. And like I say, watching it back now and just appreciating all the technical elements where you go, okay, so they must have had wires for this. They must have had this on animatronics or someone off screen, like bits where someone's reaching something at the bottom. So clearly someone's hand was there, but they've animated over the top of it. It works so well. Like, did it stand out to you, Mandy? Is there any point where you thought, oh, that cartoon's interacting with that person?
No, it all felt very natural. I remember having the thought, like, people who do special effects now should go back and watch this and figure out how they did it. Because it just felt... I never had a moment where I thought, wow, you can tell they're acting to nothing.
Yeah. I think there was a thing about... They kept working on it because there was a bit where, like, they move one of the lights, so the light starts swinging, so they had to reanimate Roger to make sure the light fit him. And it almost feels like they're doing things like that to show off. Other cartoons, other movies would keep the light static. We're going to swing it.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's become a show business trope, right? That phrase, bump the lamp, meaning like, if something's hard, do it because it's going to pay off. Don't do the easy way out. Yeah. And the fact that they had to do all the shadows and animate every frame differently it works, and it doesn't maybe drive the story, but it gives the realism that they're back there in the speakeasy. And so I've seen shirts that say bump the lamp that have like a cartoon lamp. And it's that's a filmmaker term about that, which is why people who make films now should definitely go back and watch this.
Yeah, because if they hadn't done it, I think from the audience's perspective, it really wouldn't have changed much. We wouldn't have missed it. But from the filmmaker's perspective, this was a project of love. They were passionate about it and they wanted to do the best they could. And so they did. And it absolutely paid off.
And for that reason, Mandy, I guess that's why we're talking about this 30 years later, right? Because they did. It's made it timeless. The energy they put in that. And shout out to Richard Williams, because like, you know, the animation with like the checkered floor in the kitchen, like the hard stuff to animate, he figured out what to do. And no one will ever like be able to do cell animation like that again. And yeah, his animation chops are just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is definitely one of those movies that holds up 30 years later.
Yeah, it's something you hear referenced in a load of places. Not only that it has its own references, but it's its own thing. We had a great comment on Twitter from @OSU Bookworm, who said that they love this movie. It kind of appeals to me because I love anything about the 40s noir. But also good story of redemption. Judge Doom is a great villain who's still scary today. Roger is a bit of ridiculous humor, and Eddie's evolution is great. And I think, yeah, Judge Doom is actually scary in the end. And it still works. It would still be threatening to any kid sitting down to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We also had a favorite moment come in from Garrett, who was previously on the show when we talked about Robin Hood, who loves cartoons. He has a cartoon review website. He said, Who Framed Roger Rabbit probably came out at the exact right time for me, a month before I turned 10. I knew and liked cartoons and knew the rules, and I had learned a bit about some of the people who made the old ones, but was still young enough to take things at face value and not be jaded or fully grasp the darker themes. It was also right at the beginning of when my parents started taking me and my brother to the movies at a really regular rate. And other than a few references, trench coats and sunglasses and maybe a few other surface level things, this was the very first piece of legitimate noir I ever saw. He wrote a lot more, but we don't have time. Suffice it to say, I think this is also one of Garrett's favorites. So it was cool to see all the folks chiming in on Twitter about this movie.
Yeah, it's an easy film to gush about because there's so much good going on. It's pretty flawless.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Did either of you watch the 3 shorts that came out after, like the Tummy Trouble, Roller Coaster Rabbit, and Trail Mix-Up?
No.
I feel like I've seen one of them. Was it before, like, Honey, I Blew Up the Baby or something?
Yeah, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Okay.
And part of the schism with Spielberg was that he wanted to use Roller Coaster Rabbit for arachnophobia because, you know, having these shorts helped boost ticket sales. And when they wouldn't let him, they put it before Dick Tracy. He became kind of resentful, and that further alienated Disney and Spielberg. But Mandy, you talked about how great the old school cartoons are, and they're all about like 6 minutes, but in it, Roger has to similarly babysit Baby Herman and craziness happens. And they're all very funny and full of cameos. And like the guy who scored Trail Mix-Up, James Horner, later did this Titanic score, you know, like they are great. So I like the shorts almost as much as the movie because they're very funny. And they came out like every few years. And the last one came out in, I think, 92. But they're all on YouTube, and they're also all in the bonus features of the DVD and stuff. So they're awesome.
Cool.
Okay. If there was one before Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, I've probably seen that one. But I don't remember it because that movie came out when I was young. So
Trail Mix-Up is a great name. That's a good comic name.
Oh, I spoke wrong. The person who scored Tummy Trouble was not Trail Mix-Up, did Titanic. There was a fourth one called There's a Hair in My Soup, HARE, where Roger works in the kitchen. But there's screenshots of it online, but that got canceled when Spielberg decided he wasn't down with Disney using Roger anymore. And Roger has some cameos in Tiny Toon Adventures, which is interesting, being an Amblin property.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, this definitely feels in that sort of vein, that kind of slightly later cartoons coming in, Tiny Toons and Animaniacs, and it's got more of that sort of vibe to it at times.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk for 1 second? I wanted to say something about the video games. Like, there's 2 things that are interesting about the Roger Rabbit games and how that was like showing how international licenses were, they're still figuring that out. There's 2 versions of the NES game. One of them was licensed in Japan, and when they brought it to America, the people who did the action figures had the proprietary license. So they reskinned the game as a Bugs Bunny game. So if you play the Bugs Bunny Crazy Castle NES game, you could, all the characters, it's like it's set in the Roger Rabbit universe with brick walls and characters turning green and safes and stuff, but you have to play it as Bugs Bunny. And then when they made it a Game Boy game, the dude who designed the Game Boy game later went on to create the Resident Evil franchise because it was a similar like noir problem solving kind of game. So it's interesting how the multimedia element of the movie kind of, it gave birth to a lot of the current video game stuff. So that's interesting.
God, it was such a different time where you could release basically different games in different countries or the same game as different properties. Crazy.
Right.
And you've reminded me, talking about the scores and everything, the cinematographer, he was clearly working in the same studios and same directors because he did all the Back to the Future films. He did Hook and Jurassic Park and Apollo 13. So clearly in that. Mandy, you might be interested. The guy who was director of photography on this did The Holiday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He has done a range of stuff. He did both Garfield films.
Haven't seen those.
That's a guy who's doing cross-genre. Roger Rabbit to Jurassic Park to The Holiday.
Yeah, that's pretty great. All right. Well, is there anything else that we need to discuss about Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Now, when we were talking about this on Twitter, and I said, has anyone got any thoughts, any memories of it? A couple of people said they hadn't actually seen it yet. Katie Sharu and This A. Shaw. Katie actually has a small son. So I was wondering, what do we think is a good age to be introduced to this? Lars, you said you were, I think, 5, 6. Mandy, a little bit older than that, you were introduced to this?
Just a little.
Is there a point at which you're like, okay, yes, it's good because it's got this good comedy and action, but they're not necessarily going to lose it with some of the sexuality or violence?
That's really hard for me because I don't have kids, and so I don't really have an age frame of reference,
Right.
But I would probably say somewhere between 8 and 10.
Okay. Lars, were you scarred watching this so early? Has this affected you?
It's the first time I heard swearing, and like when Eddie says, "Oh, son of a bitch," when Roger explodes all the liquor bottles. It's the first time I heard swearing and heard those words. And the humor, like I didn't get the sexual humor, but like where Baby Herman goes, "The whole thing stinks like yesterday's diapers." Like that was hilarious to me. And so, if I ever had a kid, like I think probably first or second grade. I mean, it's it's scary though. I remember having friends over who didn't want to watch it when I was little because the end was so terrifying. Right. And I think that, probably not much younger than that. But also there's, you appreciate on different levels as you get older. And I would maybe show the cartoons first to a kid because they're very like benign and funny, and the shorts that came after. And if they like it, then maybe show them the movie later. That's my thought.
That's very good shout. Yeah. Yeah. Laura said the same thing. Her memory of it was like, didn't his eyes pop out at some point? I can remember hiding, so I can't remember it exactly, but okay.
All right. Well, if you would like to join the conversation, you can use the hashtag PCDeprived on Twitter. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Eloquent Gushing, or you can send us an email to podcast@eloquentgushing.com. And you can find us all on Twitter. I'm at Mandy K.
And I'm at Matthew Vose. Lars, it's been amazing having you on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Mandy and Matthew, thank you. You both are super sweet, and thank you for having me and letting me go on and on about it. And yeah, I'm on Twitter too, MC Lars. I do 2 songs a month on Patreon, and my Roger Rabbit album, Notes from Toontown, is on Spotify and iTunes. And if you go to mclars.bandcamp.com, you can listen to the commentary I did for the entire movie if you haven't heard enough about it.
Yeah, we'll definitely link to those in the show notes for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really good. You clearly love it all the way through. It's so cool. Like, oh, trivia. Oh, that's so funny. That's so cool. It's awesome. And you've got a tour coming up?
Yeah, I'll be in the UK in April. April I'm doing UK tour, and then I'm doing a May US tour. So nerdcoretour.com. And either of you, if you want in either country, if you want tickets, just hit me up. Mandy or Matthew, I'll put you on the guest list. Let me know.
We're going to try and come down to the Southampton one because when you're in London, we're in the US. So, as is always the way, but we're going to try and come and see you again at Southampton.
Joiners. That's a great venue. Cool.
Yeah, always a good fun show. And this is is it the 10th anniversary of This Gigantic Robot Kills?
That's right. My second record is the 10-year anniversary. So we have a band from Newcastle, Ruled by Raptors. They learned the song, so I'm playing with a live band, and my friends Megaran and Cuckoo Kangaroo are on the tour too. So it's going to be super fun. And yes, I'll be doing at least one, if not more, of the Roger Rabbit songs.
Ah, great. Can't wait to see it. We are 100% funded by listeners like you through Patreon. Anything you give, even $1 a month, it gives access to exclusive content and helps to support the network and develop new shows. To find out more, go to patreon.com/eloquentgushing. And don't forget to visit the homepage, eloquentgushing.com, where you can find links to all our other shows.
And we'll be back next week with another episode where we'll talk about Kingsman, the Secret Service, with Tyler of Bacon and Eggs, a movie lovers podcast. Until next time, I'm Mandy Kay.
And doesn't a dying rabbit deserve a last request?
Pop Culturally Deprived is an Eloquent Gushing production. For more information, please visit eloquentgushing.com.